Welcome and thank you for attending. Questions can be asked using the questions pane in the webinar control panel. A copy of the handout can be found in the handout section. Today's presentation will be recorded. If you have any objection, you may disconnect at this time. I will now turn the presentation over to your presenter. You may begin.
Thank you and good afternoon, SHRM, Long Island. It is Friday, November 22nd. We are quickly approaching the end of the year, Thanksgiving, the holiday season, all hopefully fun, good things. Today, this is Henry Shapiro, I should come out and say that. Today, we are going to dive into what a lot of you might have already planned for, be planning for if you're procrastinators, or getting ready to host, which would be a company holiday party. Some of you might have been so scared off by what you read in the news and what you hear from Jackson Lewis at breakfast series and these webinars and anytime you call us to talk or any counsel that you deal with, that you have been scared off to not even doing a holiday party anymore. And as I'm not the fun police, that's okay too. But for those of you that still enjoy the holiday party, Jackson Lewis still has its holiday party, but following all the rules that we're going to go through today. There are ways to do it, things to be mindful of, and things to avoid at all costs, and more importantly, risks to be on the lookout for to make sure you know what could be a problem for your company and what are things you should do in the event that one of these problems starts to develop. So, there we go. All right, so what are the potential issues that we see with holiday parties? And I could have just said everything, because that probably would have been fair too. But the big one is obviously what happens when you throw a match on top of lighter fluid. In this case, it is what happens when you combine alcohol and arguably a more relaxed environment than the general or typical workplace environment on a day-to-day basis with employees of both genders, where people feel that they might be held to a different standard, a lesser standard, because one or two drinks, quote unquote, loosens them up a little bit. That's where you, as an HR professional or as a small business owner, your light has to go on and say, wait, what do I need to be mindful of, and how can I take the best measures from a defense standpoint prior to said holiday party? So what are some of the issues that we're going to talk about? Sexual harassment, that's probably the most obvious one, and I'm sure everybody on this webinar is sick of hearing me or Chris or any other Jackson Lewis or attorney that you work with talk to you about New York State sexual harassment prevention and laws and trainings and all that fun stuff. But we'll cover it a little bit. We're going to go into the potential religious issues, disability and libation issues, wage hour issues, productivity issues, and we'll end with a little bit of a best practices, how to, what can you do? So, sexual harassment. Number one, if you are not already tuned in to ways to cut harassment out of the workplace with preventative measures, policies, training, a zero tolerance policy, strict enforcement of any people who or discipline against any people who go too far. You know, the I'm just joking or it's no big deal, that won't fly. What you are already doing with regard to anti-harassment and your policies, it applies at the holiday party. And if any of you have had your employees or yourselves been trained by myself or any of my colleagues here at Jackson Lewis with regard to anti-harassment prevention in light of the new New York State law, you know these laws go beyond the workplace. These are not this is not a four walls of the workplace law. If things that violate policies happen outside the workplace and then they make their way into the workplace such that they create an intimidating, offensive, or hostile work environment, we have an issue as a company. We have an issue as an employer. So what does that mean? That means that at your holiday party, it is not a get out of jail free card that, I had a beer and I can do what I want. The rules of the workplace still apply. I should be held to a standard of professionalism and respect and appropriate behavior. I don't get to say I had a drink or two, so now you have to excuse my conduct. If I know, and you can make this clear to your employees, if people do not trust themselves, so to speak, after having a drink, then maybe not having a drink is the best way to go. Have water, have soda, do something else. We obviously want to be careful not to discourage people from coming to something that everybody, if you're holding it, everybody should be invited to. But we also don't want to make this that the company is condoning or giving an open invitation to people to violate work rules for a 2 or 3 hour period during the holiday party. So if anybody hasn't, and this ties to the New York State law as well, if anybody has not already adopted and distributed their sexual harassment or anti-harassment and EEO policies to all their employees during the training, after the training that is required by New York State, or doesn't have it in a handbook, or for whatever reason, do it before the holiday party. The last thing you want is an employee to say, I was never given a policy, and we don't have a policy. I never signed anything. I never knew about anything. As a defense attorney, that's what we don't want. What we want is to hear from the employer, I should say, that you have a policy, you did the training, you have acknowledgments, you need to put your best foot forward at all times. So it should be made very clear prior to the holiday party that these policies still apply at the party. If people decide to take it to an after party and go to a bar or some other gathering spot after the company sanctions party, make it clear that everything still applies. The behavior is still expected to be workplace appropriate and consistent with what is expected of the employees pursuant to the policies that you maintain. So again, you want to remind employees prior to the event that sexual harassment, any harassment based on any protected category, is prohibited. Unfortunately, statistically, when you have alcohol mixing with men and women, you sometimes run into these sexual harassment problems more so than the others, but they all are prohibited. Distributing your policy is absolutely going to be a best practice to remind people how serious you take this. From a religious standpoint, and this is something that comes up in the news very often, it comes up with certain companies with regard to their drinkware, their coffee cups, and how they communicate messages to the public. Whether you agree with it or disagree with it is not the concern. The issue is, what can you do as an employer to put yourself in the best position? So saying or hosting a Christmas party, is using the word Christmas unlawful? No, that's not my concern. My concern is where you host a party that you invite all your employees to. The expectation is that it's mandatory, unless you have a good excuse as to why you cannot make it. If you call it a Christmas party, you may, keyword in that third line is, you may offend employees who do not celebrate Christmas and potentially lead to claims of religious discrimination or a religiously hostile work environment. Do I realistically think that this in a vacuum is enough? Probably not. Can I say that we will never see this claim in our lifetimes? I can also probably not say that either. At this point, I don't know what to expect that could come in future years. However, the second bullet point, it's a contributing factor. It's a totality of the circumstances issue. So if you use Christmas party, if you only hang Christmas decorations, if you have Christmas carols come in, if you have an outside group come in, or even employees sing Christmas carols, songs historically tied to the Christmas holiday. All of those things combined, could you start to lead to a religious discrimination claim? I suppose that claim can be made. So what do? You either try to keep things secular, or you try to be as equal as possible and consider all holidays. And unless you are a religious scholar and you are aware of all holidays that need to have equal representation in the workplace, the term holiday party will kind of cover everything for you, rather than Christmas party. So just again, things to think about as you move forward and what you call it. If you pay attention to the news, you know that this is not just Henry trying to be a stickler for detail. These are things that have come up across the country. Workers' comp issues. This is a slightly different analysis than we may typically deal with as it's under the workers' comp structure, but under New York law, where an employee's social activities and the key languages are in connection with and incidental to his or her employer's business, they become a part of the employment. Once they're a part of the employment, so if employee at this holiday party, if it's determined to be closely enough connected and somewhat considered to be mandatory as far as attendance, it's closely enough connected, what happens if employee breaks his leg slipping on a spill on a dance floor or even walking to a table at one of these events? Could workers' comp apply? Yes, it could. It's ultimately going to be the determination of a workers' comp insurance carrier, but it's an issue you could be facing because it's going to be looked at as an extension of the workplace or incidental to the employer's business. Some New York State courts have awarded benefits to employees who sustained injuries as a result of becoming intoxicated at sales meetings and company-sponsored social functions. So that's putting right in front of you the hypothetical I just gave you of you run the risk of if an employee is injured, or if you have said employee at the event who is overserved or who drinks too much or goes to great lengths to sneak in his or her own alcohol to liven up their experience at the party, and they do something or they hurt themselves, there could be substantial risk there. Again, not meant to say holiday parties are strictly forbidden, just ways we want strict enforcement. This is really no different than what you are already becoming or are trained to do in the workplace when it comes to issues of discrimination and harassment. Your eyes and ears are open at all times. Some wage hour issues. So there's always going to be issues with should people be paid to go to the holiday party? Well, it depends how the holiday party is perceived. If it's during business hours, if you are excusing them from work to go to this holiday party, but everybody's going and it seems mandatory, then the argument is going to lean towards the employee that he or she should be paid for their time. If it's after business hours, your argument might differ, but I am aware of many companies that usually will do something either in the office or outside the office, but during business hours and not after hours. If you do something after hours, then we need to look at how is the message disseminated. Is it something where the employee should be paid? Does it appear to be mandatory? Obviously, if it's mandatory, then you're going to want to pay people for their time. If you're just going to come out and say it's mandatory. But keep in mind some of the other things that go into these parties. So decorating, shopping for supplies, your proverbial party planning committee. People need to be paid for their time. There are always hypotheticals we can throw in here where maybe somebody gets out without being paid, but generally speaking, obviously, if we're also talking about de minimis amounts of money here, de minimis amounts of time, then for liability issues, because you don't want the DOL to come knocking or a plaintiff's attorney to pick up a soured employee over that they didn't get paid 30 minutes for going to the store to buy streamers, consider the practical versus legal ramifications of your decision. So what can we do? What should you do? So a couple, and some of this you might think is incredibly obvious, but you'd be surprised how many times it falls by the wayside. Be honest with your employees. Make sure that employees understand the workplace, their policies, your handbook, your rules apply even at the holiday party. Substance abuse issues, if you have drug testing or substance abuse policy that covers some of the activity that could occur at the holiday party, it doesn't suddenly stop applying just because you're at a holiday party. It is a good idea to put employees on notice that, hey, just remember, this still applies. You can consider posting any policies that you think are incredibly relevant to the holiday party. There's obviously reasons why you might not want to do it if you're purposely not trying to draw attention to something, but more often than not, the best practice is going to be tell everybody if your handbook and your policies are up to date and lawful, you're going to want to draw attention to them because you're going to want to make sure everybody knows what is expected of him or her. And when that person fails to do something that they are, or fails to abide by a standard that they are expected to abide by, you want that person to, you want to be able to say in your defense that you did everything you could to put this person on notice, including redisseminating the policy or the handbook or posting it, everything you can, emailing if that works, whatever you need to do. It's recommended because there's no downside to giving too much knowledge, too much information of things that are binding and lawful and that apply at all times. So other suggestions, and excuse me for trying to be your party planner, but what else could you do? So you could try something new if you want to get out of the alcohol business or that mindset or that concept. And this is not, I don't bring this up as an innovative idea that nobody's thought of it. It's been done. That's why this comes up. So some companies will do an indoor carnival or a group outing. Are there other factors to consider? Sure. There's morale issues, but historically, if you've had issues with your holiday party, liability concerns, then maybe a change is for the best, and you're not going to be at fault if you're putting your company in a better spot when it comes to, I made it less fun. We all want to have fun, but we have to keep in mind work is work. It's great if everybody gets along and things are enjoyable, but fun is extracurricular. It's not a mandatory requirement of your office party. Make sure, obviously, employees know when to say when. If you serve alcohol at the office event or the office party or a holiday party or any kind of gathering, make sure everybody knows they are welcome to attend. You don't want to single anybody out, but everybody's expected to follow company policy and act responsibly. That goes at all times. Again, this is something that probably comes up in anti-harassment training. And again, you want to give people options that want to be responsible. Alcohol need not be the only answer. If you have water, soda, other things available, that's what you're looking to do. This one I kind of laugh at because I don't have a medical degree, but it's something we recommend. Be smart about what you serve. Salty, greasy, sweet foods, they will more likely make people crave some kind of liquid. If that liquid becomes alcohol to drink, just understand the risk that you're putting in front of your employees and the risk you're putting your company at. As far as, if you want to go get a private chef or an executive chef to create your menu, then have at it, and please invite me to the holiday party. But also, and this will probably fall on many of the people listening to this webinar, if you're in the business of HR or a small business owner, have people, we would refer to them as, chaperones to if you have children, to their events at school, but have party managers, have party chaperones, have people that are responsible for being in charge. And you want that to be people that are well versed in taking complaints, knowing the rules. So you're looking for people to be supervised, people that are supervisors or managers and know how to manage personalities. Just have them keep an eye out and understand that, if the need comes to enforce a policy at the party, then let's pull people to the side and do what we need to do. This one's also an obvious one to avoid drinking and driving concerns. Make sure that if you do something off-site, or even if you do it on-site, consider transportation for your employees, consider alternate transportation. It will be worth the money you spend in transportation to avoid the unfortunate issues that can arise if somebody has one too many and gets in the car and does something that he or she is not supposed to. You'll see that second bullet point is very similar to anybody who's ever been to a baseball game or a sporting event. They will cut off alcohol sales at a certain point. When you have an open bar at a holiday party, which I imagine many would if you're serving alcohol, consider cutting it off at a certain time before it ends. Can people still leave? Sure. But if people are going to stay till the end and they don't have a drink for a couple hours, does that mean it's going to run through their system and be out? No, but at least puts you in a better spot. Lastly, as we wrap up, and I apologize for going to go a minute over, but you also want to consider sending out a memorandum, and again, this is more anticipating future defense issues, that you remind everybody that obviously drinking and driving is completely unacceptable. Have designated drivers, advise them of what the alternative transportation methods are. Don't just say, oh, we had them, but we never told anybody about them. That's useless. Make sure you get the message out, communicate with your employees, be upfront and forthcoming with what can be done for them, including maybe coming to work that day. Maybe they need a ride to work that day so they don't have their car stuck there. It's always better to pay to put somebody in an alternative means of transportation than to have them take the keys to their car. There's companies out there that you can always consider using that will get people's cars to certain places, so you don't have an individual driving under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Lastly, and this is just kind of a tactic to possibly punt some of the liability onto somebody else, onto another business. If you have the party off-site, that establishment should also share responsibility for the alcohol consumption. Have a professional bartender. Don't let the person who moonlights as a bartender and doesn't know what he or she is doing say, oh, I'll cover it for the party. It might be a cost saver, but it's not worth it. Have somebody who knows how to pour alcoholic beverages, and whether it's a mixologist or whoever you use, somebody who knows what he or she is doing and knows what to look for as far as warning signs on when to cut people off and when to water down certain drinks. It's better than than saving the fee for a couple of hours to pay that person. The no shots rule is obvious. Those won't lead to anything but trouble. You can limit the time frame of the open bar as well. Again, we said earlier, cutting it off maybe an hour or two before the end of the party. And again, lastly, monitor conduct. Don't be afraid to tell somebody, you know what, I think that's enough. If their conduct becomes inappropriate, have something objective to base it on. But again, apply the rules you would apply in the workplace. If it's something that you see that you wouldn't let fly at work, don't let it fly at the holiday party. This is not a get-out-of-jail-free card. So with that being said, I thank everybody for joining. Have a wonderful weekend, a very happy Thanksgiving. We will see you at the Breakfast Series next month, and take care. Bye-bye.